Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. So I made this desk using mostly 1/2-inch birch plywood. I also used a little bit of 1x2 pre-primed pine, but the majority of this desk is made out of the 1/2-inch birch. I started by breaking down the 3 panels that make up the base of the desk, and then I cut these stiles to size. Each panel is going to have a stile on the front and the back, and I trimmed off the primed edge here so I get a better adhesion to the birch panel. Once I get all 6 of those stiles trimmed down, I measure and cut a little accent piece to kind of highlight the foot and give it a little more aesthetically pleasing look on each panel. I made this little jig using the CA glue tape trick and was able to make 6 repetitive cuts on each stile. As you can see, it's time for a new blade on my miter saw. I used pipe clamps to glue together each panel. And once I've got the stiles exactly where I want them, I can go ahead and flip it over. And use pocket holes to secure everything in place. And I repeated this 2 more times once the first one was done, so now I've got 3 panels exactly the same, and that's going to make up the base of the desk. And before moving on to the next step, I put 4 pocket holes on the top of each panel so I could secure the top of the desk to the base. I then moved on to breaking down all the pieces necessary to make the hutch. And the hutch is going to have 4 slots at the top where our daughter can store paper and projects that she's working on and things like that. And apparently the battery needs to be installed in order for my nail gun to work. And here I am breaking down the pieces necessary in order to make those 4 slots. And these squeeze clamps come in really handy, but only if you use them correctly. And again, using pipe clamps to hold everything in place, as well as glue and pocket holes with screws. Moving on to the drawer slides now. What's really nice here about putting this desk together piece by piece is that you can install these full extension drawer slides like this instead of when the desk is already put together. And then once all of those were screwed in where I needed them, I was able to screw the base panels into the top. I've got these little spacers here, which is the exact space of the drawers, and that helps make sure I get an exact fit. And since I'm using plywood for this project, I used 1/2-inch edge banding, and I just went ahead and ironed it in place. And then that way, once I paint it, it's going to give it a lot more finished look. Here I'm starting to break down all the pieces necessary to make the drawers. This is going to have 3 drawers. 2 of them will be exactly the same, and then 1 of them will be a little bit deeper, so she'll be able to store larger items in that drawer. Here we are moving on to drawer assembly. And just using butt joints for this, glue and brad nails, nothing fancy. We don't anticipate these are going to be holding anything too heavy. Here's a trick I learned from Brad at Fix This, Build That. He chamfers the bottom of his drawers. It gives it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing look. It makes it so you basically can't even see the bottom of the drawer when you're staring right at it. And then I rounded off both the inside and the outside of each drawer, just with a little round over bit to give it a little bit of a smoother feel. And again, installing those drawer slides before putting the cabinet together really made it a lot easier to get these drawers installed correctly. And it's starting to look like a desk. Sorry for the terrible camera angle here, but I'm drilling dowel holes. I'm gonna fasten the hutch to the desk using 3 dowels on each side. It's just a 1/4-inch dowel, as well as some glue, and then the back panel is going to tie the entire thing together, so it'll be plenty strong. And this is about 10 minutes of fidgeting, distilled down into just a couple of seconds, but I was able to get everything lined up and secured down. And then again, those long pipe clamps came in handy in clamping this all together and letting it sit overnight. Now I'm going to start working on the trim on the top of the hutch. This is all purely aesthetic, but it really gives that custom look to the desk. And this is just a little spacer piece I'm putting together. I'm going to use 2 pieces of trim. I'm going to use a little 3/4-inch detail piece, as well as a piece of about 1.5-inch crown molding. And my pin nailer comes in really handy for this small trim. Here I am with that little detail piece, and then moving on to the crown. In order to really give it a finished look, I cut a piece of 1/2-inch plywood with an angle at the top and the front, and some little support blocks here, and I was able to glue that on the top again just to give it that finished look. This also acts as another shelf, so you can set things up on top of it. Moving back over to the drawers using some double-sided tape here and putting on the drawer fronts, making sure that they are exactly where I want them. And once they are, I go ahead and screw everything together from the inside of the drawer. In order to give the desk a little bit more side-to-side support, I installed a couple of plywood blocks in the back and fastened those together with dowels. And that'll give the desk a little bit more side-to-side strength. My flush cut saw comes in really handy here. Just using a piece of 1/4-inch maple plywood for the back, and this also gives it some added strength. I'm just using glue and brad nails here to hold it all together. Now I'm showing off my muscles as well as my lifting technique. I'm not sure why I still have my ear protection on there. I'm just finishing off the back panel with a little bit more of that 1/4-inch plywood. And now sanding. This is again probably about an hour of sanding distilled down into just a couple of seconds. And again, painting, one of my least favorite things to do, but necessary in order for this whole thing to look good. Once that was done, I moved on to the drawer hardware and did a final coat of sanding and finished it all off with a couple of coats of water-based polyurethane. And since this is a desk for a 6-year-old girl, my wife found these awesome crystal drawer pulls, which are going to really bring this whole thing together once they're installed. And that wraps it up. That is the end of the build. So cue glamour shots now.
I am going to be so happy with this new desk.